100 Pounds Down is proudly brought to you by my agency, JKD Global Travel, curating moments of purposeful immersion for professionals to recharge, recenter, and reconnect with what matters most. Start your journey at jkdtravel.com. Welcome back to 100 Pounds Down, where we preach the gospel of GLP-1 and the word is good. I'm Kristen DiBiase, and after a lifetime of struggling with obesity, I lost over 41% of my body weight on tirzepatide, also known as Mounjaro and Zepbound, and I'm never going back. If you've been considering starting anti-obesity medications like these, Ozempic or Wegovy, you're already in the middle of your journey, or you're getting close to that maintenance phase and wondering what comes next. Bring it in. Well, hey everybody. I am traveling yet again, and so I'm doing another one of those hotel room episodes. But this time I actually planned ahead and I have brought a real microphone with me. So we will see how this goes. I've got a couple of updates for you all in today's agenda before we get into the main purpose of today's video. Just so you all know, Novo Nordisk did report out to the FDA that they are out of a shortage on semaglutide, also known as Ozempic or Wegovy. Now, they put that report in on the last day of October, and so the FDA shortage website shows them as having updated their information as of November 1st. Curiously, even though it does show that every single dosage is available, the status for the drug, semaglutide, still remains categorized as in shortage by the FDA. So my thought here is that given that this idea around whether or not there truly is an end to the shortages of medication for not just semaglutide, but also tirzepatide, based on the lawsuit that led to the FDA going back to reconsider final information and additional information outside of simply what Lilly told them regarding the availability of the medication tirzepatide, I think that that could be the reason we've not yet seen an official update from the FDA declaring that Novo is out of a shortage. They may be just waiting to take some time to come to a determination on that issue, and they are going ahead and doing the same kind of additional investigation that they are doing for tirzepatide. So that's my theory there. Now, on to the subject matter for today's episode. Now, as a bunch of folks know, because I tend to drop little gems of information when I am talking to people in the comments on videos. And I also often will correspond with folks who send me messages through the website, or who also send me an email based on the information that they find off of my website. I do get a lot of really great comments and questions from people that just aren't enough to turn into an episode by themselves. At the same time, I found myself, as I was working through and intending to do my research on a series of videos that I've been working on trying to get out, that, well, we had a fairly big occurrence that happened within the past couple of weeks, and I needed to pivot to start doing some research about that before I could really feel happy going back to our business as usual kind of information that I put out here on the site. Right now, I've pivoted and have been doing pretty extensive research and looking through information so I can do a video to give you all my best opinion based on past and current events of what I think could be the future for GLP-1 medications under an incoming Trump administration. While I'm working on that video, I thought that this would be a great time to pull together some of those things that I had gotten comments and questions about that would group together for a nice video. And I think I will start to do this periodically because there's lots of great stuff that I hear from people who are responding to me either privately or in the comments. So this is a community talks back video, and this will be the first in what I hope will be many coming up down the line. So, our first comment that I really wanted to talk about was I saw someone who had commented about the fact that they thought that 10 milligrams was pretty high for a maintenance dose of this medication. And I've also seen a lot of people when I'm looking and researching and reading things in forums and places about this idea of titrating all the way down, to the lowest dose once you get to maintenance. And so, what I want to point out with that is it makes a lot of sense that that would be what people's thought pattern is. However, this really is a pattern of thought that kind of falls under that general kind of paradigm that we often have followed when it comes to talking about weight loss and the purpose of what this medication is being used for. Specifically when the only version of this medication, which again we all know behind the scenes is the exact same medication, but when the original FDA approved reason for this medication was simply to aid in the fight against type 2 diabetes, right? Weight loss was not the reason that people were getting on the medication in the original sense. It was for people who are diabetic. And so when you have a chronic condition like diabetes or metabolic resistance, you are taking a medication to fix a dysfunction within your body. So, the purpose of taking medications for chronic illness is to find the medication level that is the right one that fixes the dysfunction and maintains that level of functionality for you. So when we take that idea and we think about that as the real reason for why this medication is being prescribed, even for people who are losing weight, while yes, we're doing it for weight loss, we're really taking this type of medication because we're looking at the underlying causes of the obesity in the first place, which is metabolic dysfunction, insulin dysfunction, some kind of irregularity in how things are supposed to be normally processing within our body, be that because of hormones, genetics, or any of the other things that these medications have a reach that it can act on. And so when you think about it from that perspective, it starts to make a little bit more sense as to why a lot of times you will see people that stay on a fairly high dose within the range of doses that are available from Eli Lilly. This is also why Lilly themselves recommend that for maintenance that the 5 milligram, 10 milligram, and 15 milligram doses are what they recommend for a maintenance dose. A lot of people, even the ones who are taking this very specifically for weight loss, kind of forget because they hear a lot of people talking about how, stay on the lowest version of the dosage that you can. And I'm a person who says that as well, because if your purpose is specifically to lose weight, you want to get efficacy at the lowest possible dosage that you can. And that is not because I'm telling people don't get on as high of this medication because there's an issue with that. It's actually because we just don't know, because we are really in a place where this medication has started to change a paradigm, but medicine is not quite yet to the point where we can do that bespoke custom medication that is perfectly individualized for each of us as individual people. And so, because there are differences in the people who take this medication, you've got folks who are super responders like me, you've got folks who are the opposite of me who are having maybe the wrong response. Maybe some people are gaining. And I know I've got a person in the comments who talked about their struggle, and they're actually gaining weight on the medication when they were put on it for diabetes. And that is absolutely something that can happen because this is currently, although very great for the broad swath of people, there are individual folks who are just genetically or hormonally different than the average bear all across that spectrum. And so any commonality among what most people have will still have outliers among specific individuals. And so because we know that generally speaking, there are people who are kind of in the middle there where they will get to efficacy, but maybe the length of time that the medication tends to work for certain people who are not hyper or super responders. Maybe there is a length of time in which that medication has reached its max efficacy. And so if there is a chance that you're a person who's more in the middle of the road and this medication does have kind of a length of time after which it will no longer work as well as it used to, that's the reason why we recommend that people get on as at the lowest dose and stay at the lowest dose that they can stay at where they're still having a good and consistent result. It's not because less is better than more. It is just so you have room to go up in case the efficacy at that particular dosage finally does tap out. You've got room to grow, in other words. Now, because there is that idea of having the room to grow, that is something else that often, gives people the idea of, oh, well, once I get to maintenance, I need to go back down again. Again, you are looking at this not as, oh, I've gone up on this to lose the weight, so now I need to go back down on it now that I'm at the weight that I need to be at. Instead, thinking of it as a thing where I am going to always try to stay at the dosage for me that maintains the benefits that I am taking this medication for, but also giving myself room for adjustment if necessary. So if someone gets to maintenance and they are thinking, oh, okay, well, I don't really want to be all the way up here at 15, which is for me, I had to come down from 15 because I would continue to lose if I was still at 15. So 15 was too high for me because I was still losing once I got to the weight where I wanted to stay. So that could be a thing for people. But the other part with that is then for me, 10 is exactly where I need to be for the mental health benefits that I've been getting from this medication, for the ability for me to not have the food noise still, and where if I am eating like a normal person, not eating a crazy amount, but also not under eating the minimum number of calories that I need to have a balance to stay where I am in maintenance. This dosage, the 10 milligrams for me, is the right dose that does all of those things. You never want to get to a place where you are going someplace where it introduces the struggle back in. Because that goes again to this mentality around why are we taking the medication? There are people who genetically, hormonally, who don't need to take this medication, who don't have that struggle. And that's why they don't need to be on the medication. Their bodies are functioning without that metabolic or insulinergic dysfunction, without that food noise that's happening in their heads. The medication is to treat those symptoms. It's not about, we did it the easy way or anything like that. It is really, there is internally a dysfunction that this medication is repairing or supplementing to make sure that how our body is supposed to be working is the way it's actually working. And so if we think about the medication at maintenance as keeping our body functioning properly, then you start to see why it's not just a thing of you should definitely titrate all the way down, because we are really trying to maintain the proper function of our body where it is carrying out those functions that other people's bodies do for them on their own because their bodies did not have the dysfunction. So that's the first thing that I noticed a lot of people commenting around, even in forums, and I got some messages from people around that as well. The next thing that I got a lot of comments from people on, it came from my maintenance video as well. And that is this issue of being afraid of regaining, being really scared that something is going to happen and we're going to regain that weight again. And let me tell you, I've got to say, it is very much, very, very strongly something that I have a concern about as well. I've seen people who have shared that worry that the medication will stop working and that they will regain the weight. And I talk about the science, I talk about my confidence in it and all of those things. But at the same time, just like a lot of you, I am a person who, before this medication, I struggled. I tried and failed to maintain significant weight loss 5 times before I started this particular journey and I started taking this medication. And so for me, it is I'm trusting in the science, but I've had many, many times where I've not been able to maintain the success that I had, and I'm terrified of that, behind the scenes. And I'm definitely not thinking that this is a perfect solution and there won't be some days where there are things to navigate around. But yeah, in case people are thinking that I'm super brave, I'm not. I definitely have the same concern. And to that wit, I have a story. So a couple of days after I recorded the video for my maintenance update and gave everybody that kind of 6 months, here's where I am, I did my weigh in and I was up a few pounds. And I immediately, internally started freaking out like, what's going on? What can I do? And, going and thinking, like, what have I been doing over the last several days? And is it now? Is it now that the medication is like finally starting to not work? And what should I do? All of those thoughts that you have come in and you just start panicking around. I was having those. But then I kind of paused. I did, my slow, mindful breaths and said, chill out for a second. Let's think rationally. Let's think around what's been going on. And I talked to my husband, and right away he reminded me we had this delicious, delicious soup the night before I weighed in. It was the day of my shot, and I weigh in the next day after, as you all know. And that soup was so good. And for me, I am a person who I'm a big salt person. And for a while, I had kind of an issue where it was really hard for me actually to maintain a proper sodium level. I'm just 5 billion kinds of weird, honestly. But so for me, I'm always wanting more salt in things. And so if I eat something and I think it tastes perfectly flavored, that means it's probably really high in sodium, because it takes a lot for me to feel like the salt level in something is one enough for me, and it's probably just an entire salt lick if I think that it tastes perfect. And so Jason was absolutely right. We'd had a really salty meal the night before weigh-in, and everybody knows that that's going to make you retain water, and that's exactly what happened. I continued just doing what I normally did. I wasn't overdoing things. One of the things that I had been doing in the prior week, in addition to having that delicious soup, was I'd started to incorporate, some of the more natural nitrate-free pepperoni and things like that back into my diet. And I did that because I was hoping, like, maybe if I add a little bit more fat in the foods that I'm eating, because I'm not really trying to stay away from fat. It's just that when you've done a lot of different methods and trying to lose weight many, many times, there's certain things that you just pick up and you never really put back down. You always kind of take some of the knowledge from each of the different approaches that you have taken in the past and you carry that with you into your next endeavor. And so for me, I'm not actively trying to, have low fat versions of stuff and things like that. I don't really go for the lower fat, specifically because, especially when you're looking at prepared foods, anything that is advertising itself as low fat is going to usually be higher in sugar, because if you don't have fat, which is delicious flavor, you have to make food taste good another way if you're eating stuff that's processed, and they're going to do that by adding sugar. So for me, I generally kind of stay at a lower intake of sugar unless I am specifically eating something that's supposed to be sweet. And then it's like, yeah, I'm going to eat this sugary whatever because that's the point of it. But generally, we try not to overly indulge in any one thing too much. And so we have food that has fat in it, but we're not really eating a ton of overly high fat items, with the exception being generally cheese in our household. And so for a while, one of the things that I had been eating, that I was doing in order to make sure I could keep my calorie numbers up back when it was really hard for me to eat when I was initially on the medication, was I was eating pepperoni a lot, because even when you're not hungry, you know that you can get those calories in when you're eating something that's a much higher fat content. Because remember, there's, the number of calories that you get from 1 gram of fat is 5 calories more than you're getting from, 1 gram of protein or 1 gram of carb, which those are only 4 calories each in a single gram. And so fat is an easy way for you to put calories in when you need to get calories in. So me again, in thinking about my poor little flat behind, I thought, maybe I can try changing this with my eating instead, by just adding some more fat into my diet, in that way. And I think honestly that that's probably one of the reasons that, as I had been doing this, that I started to settle in and feel a little bit better, about how my body was starting to reshape itself. And that's because I upped my fat intake just a little bit. But pepperoni, as delicious and fat, filled as it is, it also is high in sodium. And so the following week, I was right back to normal. And I was still eating the pepperoni. So it really was that soup that kind of did me in, because I had it right before weigh-in the night before, and that sodium had me retaining water. So freak out was averted by me trying to do some reality testing with myself, which is stuff that I always do anytime I'm feeling a little bit worried about something. And then the scale went right back where it was before and proved that, once again, right now things are going really well with that. And for me, that's been really good. So anybody else who's having those thoughts, that's a little story I can share. I am definitely not Wonder Woman here. I have the same concerns and worries and hopes that other people have. I'm just a little bit further ahead, and you all will be in the same place that I currently am soon enough, for sure. On the other end of that scale, I have a lot of folks who are viewers who talk to me about being kind of the opposite of me. We've got folks who are in that slow and steady gang. And that is really important to hear, because I talk usually, from my own experience, but I really want to bring in what I hear other people talking about. And that's why I did my No Zempics video, because there really is a range of experiences that people are having on these medications. And I think the thing that I find most important is to really commend people. There's a few folks in here. One of my subs who watches the channel, Dean, has been here from almost the beginning. Shout out, Dean. Hey. And Dean and folks like Dean are in the slow and steady club, but they are having progress just at a slower rate than I am, and then some other people who are a little faster responders are having. And it's important that people like Dean and others who have made similar comments exist here, because if we are really being honest, and I love to be honest. I have a ton of respect for people who are having a slower loss than what I had. One of the things with me is that I have ADHD, and that is really, really hard to deal with sometimes. There are some days where I will sit and just think, ugh, if I could just be a neurotypical today, that would be great. But in a very specific area, of my life, that is a thing that can be a struggle. And that is sticking with things for long, extended periods of time. I don't have a willpower issue. And if I decide, oh, I want to lose weight, I'm going to put my mind to it and I'm going to do that. And that's how I was successful in losing a large amount of weight 5 times prior to this. The part where my ADHD really is a struggle is if you start to get into anything that is like a medium range goal and, good Lord, a long-term range goal. I am not great with those. For things that are medium term, and I would consider where I am right now medium term, and the end of having lost weight is definitely a long-term goal. When it comes to things where I need to have a medium term or a long term length of stick to itiveness, as I like to call it, right? Consistency, really sticking with something. That's really hard for people who have ADHD. Like, even when we like the thing that we are doing, a lot of times we get bored really easily. The monotony of routine is very necessary, and the monotony of structure is very necessary, but it also really chafes. And so it makes it really difficult to stick to something that needs that longer term consistency and attention. And so for me, one of the things that I typically do to help me with goals that I have that fall in that medium or long range category is I do a lot of set it and forget it, or done for you, or there's some kind of a mechanism that is in place that's going to just force me to do whatever the thing is, because I internally, I literally, my brain does not do that very well with certain things. And so on the very long lens, pulling way back, I think the only long-term things I have ever been consistent in was going to school and completing my education. And the second one would be my marriage. And that is because when you think of those two major things, what is in common with those? There is this constant um, reaffirmation, or this constant mechanism of things that continue to renew that goal, or to put that goal back in front of your face, right? The If I had to think of the length of time that I was in schooling, right, from childhood all the way up through adulthood, I finished my last degree when I earned my JD. I was 25 by the time I came out of school. And I knew myself that the reason that I went straight through school was because if I took time off, like if I took a gap year, if I took some time and went to work and maybe then thought about, coming back later, I don't think that I would have come back. And so there's things like that. Me being very deliberate about what my educational path would be and how I would pursue it is a mechanism that I put in place. For people who kind of deal with that medium length and that long length issue, academic years are things that get you through that, right? They're cyclical and it's something that's happening again, but there's constant change at the same time that there is constant consistency when you are in an academic environment. And I'm sure, subconsciously that is how I ended up working in education, right? Every year is something new and something different and yet something the same. So it's got that real mix of kind of what I need for my brain and how my brain works to stay consistent and in those ways. And in our marriage, right? I mean, life itself has things that keep that going. When you're a newlywed, everything is new and different, and there's an energy that is there around that. And then as you get to another point in life, you're hitting different milestones. You're doing something different. Maybe someone gets a different job, or you buy a home, or some people might have children, or all kinds of things that add those little pieces of spontaneity and things that are new, um, and supplement something that is consistent and that is there. And so, honestly, those are the only two things that I've ever long range made it through and continue to maintain. And so, for me, knowing that about myself, I mean, that is absolutely one of the reasons, in addition to just all of the genetic and biological and hormonal reasons, that it was so hard for me to maintain the losses that I had. A lot of that really does factor in. And so in this situation, this is now that set it and forget it mechanism for me. It's I am able, if I just do very small, very simple things like don't go crazy when I eat, make sure that I take my shot each week. There are things I have to do that are still incumbent on me to make sure that I am staying with this goal. But the things that are on me to do are much simpler and easier to do than those harder pieces, like having to fight food noise, which some people don't even have to do. And that's where, with this medication, that is what is enabling me to be able to go the distance here. And that's why the people who are in the slow and steady club, like Dean and other folks who have made comments that are similar, I have the utmost respect for all of you, because this medication is what is continuing to even the playing field. So, you in particular, Dean, hi again. I know I'm kind of calling you out here, and hopefully I'm not embarrassing you, but it really has stuck with me since the last set of comments when we were chatting down there. The fact that you are able and were able for so much of your adulthood to just do the dang thing every day before the medication was a thing. That is something I could never do for an extended period of time like you were able to do. And folks just like you who are in that same kind of situation metabolically with how you are, responding to this medication. And so it's really, really cool to see how this medication has been so helpful to people from all different positions on this spectrum of how we are responding to this medication. The people who do have that ability to really tough it in and be consistent day in and day out for long periods of time are now getting that metabolic boost that is helping to reward that consistency that they have. And the people who come from a place like I come from, where I've got the drive and I can do the thing for a certain length of time, but that staying power afterward, that foreverness of what maintenance means, having this medication be a thing that can help to strengthen my ability to do that forever, that long and medium term thing is a real gift. And so it's just really cool to hear people's stories and see how this medication is really changing lives regardless of where people are sitting in this, this spectrum of how we respond to the medication. And the last comment I want to highlight is one that I'm actually going to read kind of verbatim the question and my response. And this is a shout out to a user, RRT401. I was honestly like tickled pink that I got this comment. And so the comment that RRT had made was, and this was on my boot camp compilation video. And so for folks who haven't seen it yet, my boot camp compilation, go check it out, number one, because it talks to you about how our bodies actually work and gives you a nice backgrounder on like how that goes down. And then that backgrounder then leads into explaining how these medications work and how it leverages all of the stuff that I just told you about how your body works. So you really get a more in-depth understanding of how these meds work. And my feeling with this is if you understand how your body works, not only do you then understand how the medications work in your body, but it's a set of facts that can give you a basis from which to argue the truth and share the facts when there are people who are naysayers, who are telling us that this is the easy way out, who are saying, XYZ, this is so dangerous, and all of those different things. And people who are just coming from a place of conventional wisdom, which honestly is not that wise and sometimes is the opposite of how good sound theory around obesity and obesity medicine works. So off of my little soapbox here for a second, and let me actually go to the quote that I got from RRT. So this was on the boot camp video, and RRT said, if GLP-1 helps your pancreas generate less glucagon and GIP more glucagon, why are they together in tirzepatide? And so when I tell you I saw this question, I just about lost it, because it's a super smart question. And I was like, yay, somebody's paying attention. So I did geek out on that. And I said, OMG, I love that you noticed this. I did too, right off the bat. And I had the exact same question. From what I've been able to gather from all I've read through, my opinion is that it's a matter of amount and duration because they want to leverage the mechanics of lipid metabolism. So remember, for the folks who have seen it, we talk about two different types of metabolism that are acted on by your body, and by these medications. There's, your lipid metabolism, which is the fat metabolism, and then there is the glucose metabolism or the sugar metabolism in your body. And so all of these processes, they both regulate both types of metabolism. And so that was like why this was like such a cool like thing, to see that somebody else noticed that apparent contradiction. So I loved it. I keep geeking. Okay. Because glucagon is so valuable within the lipid metabolic process, they want the body to make more of it. So the lipid metabolism process and like what glucagon does in it, that's the part that is the magic. And that's going to be part of the video that I start talking about when I tell you on why we lose, where we lose, and again, more small butt chronicles. But that's one of the things that glucagon is really cool in doing in the body and with these medications. So because it's so valuable within the lipid metabolic process, the scientists want our body to make more glucagon. But in a body that's working properly and doesn't have metabolic dysfunction, the goal is to keep things at an equilibrium, because again, that's what our body thermostat, our body set point is supposed to be doing. We're always trying to stay in homeostasis. We're always trying to keep things level. In the sugar metabolic process, insulin and glucagon are levers that are being pulled to keep your blood sugar steady. So if you're trying to prime the pancreas to get it to make more insulin, but you also want more glucagon, you're going to be frustrated because it's going to equally tell your body to make less glucagon, right? Because that is what happens. If you are doing this thing, it's that type, GLP-1 is telling you make more of this, but make less of this. So anytime you're just doing GLP-1, it's gonna go like that. Now, the way that it normally occurs in your body, the GIP receptor, which is the special additional receptor that tirzepatide targets in addition to the GLP-1 receptor. So again, semaglutide only targets GLP-1. Tirzepatide targets GLP-1 and GIP. So the way it normally occurs in the body, the GIP receptor mainly works after we trigger it by consuming food. Remember, because it's an incretin, right? So it's not working all of the time because we're not always eating. Our body also only makes a certain amount of chemicals and only for a certain length of time in response to that trigger. And obviously that probably varies a little bit from person to person. The medication makes it so that there is just this constant action on the GIP receptor. So it's as if we were always eating and always triggering GIP to keep being made. So now it's working even when we are not eating. By doing that, they can then use the GIP receptors to put out that make more glucagon signal all of the time. And so they essentially, when they put these two together in one medication, we're hoping that what's happening is that now that we've got GIP saying make more glucagon, it's doing it all the time, we're hoping that that makes it more powerful. That signal is doing more work than the make less glucagon signal that's coming from GLP-1. And so when you have this saying make more, but you have this saying make less, but this is saying make more all the time, we're hoping that the overall net results is that even though this one's saying make less, this one is saying make more, so much that overall it's making more. And that's basically what they are doing. They're trying to get a boost in the overall total number in the amount of glucagon that is being made. So that's why when Triple G comes out, it is going to be insane, because that one already does the same thing that tirzepatide does. It targets GLP-1, it targets GIP, but then it also just straight up targets glucagon on top of that. So the amount of glucagon that is going to be coming out when folks are taking Triple G, when they're on retatrutide, and that finally comes out of trials and lets people get on that medication, it's going to be nuts. So yeah, those were some of the best that I have seen comments in a while. So that's the tea on the Community Talks Back. If you think weight loss injections might be right for you, absolutely talk to a medical professional, preferably an endocrinologist or a specialist in obesity medicine, because those are the ones who know these meds the best. And as always, I'm not a doctor and I'm not sponsored by or a representative of any pharmaceutical companies. I'm just sharing my own experiences and giving my own personal opinions. And finally, if you find my channel helpful, please absolutely hit that trifecta. Like, subscribe, notifications, and I'll see you on the other side.